You got to identify a chip on your shoulder. For me, it's kind of trying to prove myself. So I think you have to have a tangible skill set, and you have to be the value add. Become a source for everybody or source and resource for everybody in your business, right?
Hi everyone, my name is Aman Gill. Today we're joined here with Milan Mann, who is the president of BM Group of companies. We'll be talking to him a little bit about his background, business ventures, future plans, and delve into some tips that made him successful. And yeah, I guess without further ado, Milan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. And I guess let's just get right down to it. Who are you? I know not a lot of people, I think people in industry know BM Group and they know who you are, but like, who are you?
I guess that's probably a bit by design too. It's just not to be bigger than the brand. But yeah,
Nice.
Milan Mann, born and raised in Surrey, BC. Two amazing parents, immigrated here in their early teens. I've got two older sisters as well that kind of helped mold me to the person I am today. Spent a lot of my time growing up in Langley. Now I live in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
headquarters of BM Group are in Coquitlam, BC. So we're kind of all around the province.
They're all around the province, eh? And I guess BM Group, just like in a sentence or two, summarize it. What is it? What do you guys do?
I think for us, we had the tagline of global construction solutions, so that can be interpreted two ways. One is actually physically, we have presence here in BC, Washington, Portland, Toronto, and New Delhi as well. But in terms of a singular project, we want to be global in terms of the amount of scope we can cover. So to be a global encompassing of all the scopes and services we provide. So
So you guys really are an international company then, being in the States. And I guess outside of I know we're jumping a little bit ahead, but this is interesting. I guess outside of Canada, what would you say is your biggest site? Like, where do you guys conduct the most business?
I would say still Washington State is probably our second largest market for us. But out of that office, we'll service from like Alaska, Hawaii, and a bit of the Pacific Northwest. Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess in your position as president, then you're always traveling around, trying to find new ventures, new properties to buy, things like that.
Yeah. Luckily, with the amount of resources we have, I don't have to leave too much, and I've got amazing staff and senior leaders that'll be managing most of the travel. I don't really go unless I really need to, or I want to check in on people. So.
Okay, nice. Well, let's get into BM Group more in depth. I know you've explained kind of what you guys are, but I guess what is the biggest thing that separates you from your competitors? I know we talked about it a little bit, but I want to just hear it from you.
I think what separates us from our competitors is our strength is in our diversity.
Okay.
I would say it's tough to find another construction company that covers the amount of scopes that we do and the services we provide.
Yeah.
So we have 4 segments: material supply, construction support services, structural restoration, and real estate development. And within those segments, we've got 22 brands, like I mentioned, all across the globe. So we can always find a solution for somebody. And our specialty or value add there is, you're dealing with one group of companies that has a financial strength and capabilities to take on any project. So while the individual company might be smaller and might not be the industry leader, while some of them are, together we can offer great value and save a lot of headache for our customers.
That's interesting. So I guess your business model, how you guys have adapted and created your UVP, which you just said is, I guess, vertical integration. That's how you guys are buying, I guess, these companies and doing that. And how does that affect your business? Like, obviously in BC, Canada, it's one thing buying companies, but how do you go do the same thing in New Delhi or, somewhere in the States?
Yeah, I think we definitely didn't do it maybe the right way at first. You kind of stumble into these opportunities and you want to take advantage of them. So maybe in hindsight, there's a better way to do it. But we see a strong brand, a strong team, and potential. That's kind of all we really need. We can figure out the rest later. But when it comes to acquiring companies, you got to be very cognizant of the legacy they have, the employees and whatnot. So when we're buying something in the States, it's very important that people know that their jobs are safe and you have an understanding of that business. And we do a similar operation here. So we were quite familiar with the products, services to provide, and if all else fails, we can troubleshoot that business from here. India was a bit tough. It was one of our suppliers looking to exit the service and side of their business and just focus on material supply. So we were working with them in BC. They knew we had ties to India and thought, you know what, let's give these guys the first crack at it. And there's obviously, as we all know, a lot of potential in India. It's just being kind of mindful of and strategic with your growth plans there.
Nice. I think that's I think your business model is very interesting. And I do see the UVP that you guys offer. Like, not a lot of people doing that. Like, even in terms of companies, I think the only other company that does what you guys do is Ani, and you're the only other company that does it. And you guys are Indian owned, which is like, I mean, I'm from Surrey, right? So it's nice to see that, like, we're kind of up there doing stuff, right? So good on you guys. Okay, so we know a little bit about the company and we know a little bit about you. So how did you get into the company? How did you start?
Yeah, so obviously BM Group is a family-owned business. So it was started by my father. I think BM Group, as we know it now, was started in 2010 when we made our first acquisition.
2010. Wow.
My dad was involved in materials testing and single-family home construction and design in the early 90s. Moved into multifamily in 2004, and that's kind of where my first introduction to the construction industry began. I was helping and doing odd jobs around sites for when I was 10 to 16, and as we made our first acquisition, I became more and more involved on the opco side. Just working in the summers, on the weekends, cleaning up the warehouse, just so I knew what product we had, how much inventory we had, so you can kind of visually see how much inventory is leaving the warehouse. There's actually the building we're in right now. I'd drive here on the Sundays. I'd clean the toilets and the offices. On Saturday, I'd go through the warehouse. So that's how I got my first introduction. So definitely it's a product of being in a family business, but it wasn't necessarily what we had planned when I was in high school or going through my undergraduate degree. It just kind of made sense in the moment.
Nice. And then, obviously you kind of started from the bottom of your organization to where you are now as president. And in between then, I'm sure you've had tons of other opportunities to go into different aspects of the business, right? But specifically, I want to know, what was your first leadership experience like? What was the role? What did you do? And, what did you struggle with? What did you learn from it?
I think my first leadership role was in our real estate development side. So we have a general contracting company that self-performs most of our wood frame and concrete projects. So that was my first leadership position, was you're being a development manager or a site super. You wear multiple hats when you're a lean, mean organization like ours. So dealing with trades that are, 15, 20 years your senior, or they maybe were at your 5th birthday party, and and there's tight timelines, you're trying to implement new processes. So that's like the first time I was in a leadership role, was creating new systems, leading people that are a lot older than you, and sometimes there's a bit of a language barrier, there's an age difference, they might not want to listen to you, and they might want to supersede you and just go, I'll just call your dad, I don't think you're doing this right. So there's a few things that you have to work through. But that was my first leadership role. It's quite challenging, but I think once people see the work you're willing to put in, and if you're just explain why you're thinking, that kind of saves you a lot of headache down the line too. It's just getting people to buy in.
And buying in, I think that's the biggest thing as well. I mean, for myself, obviously I'm a property manager, and I've been in leadership positions since I was probably 21. And essentially it's the same thing that I faced as you. Where it's like, these guys that are like 50, 60 years old, been in industry for so long, like, who the hell are you trying to tell them anything? So I definitely understand that. Aside from that, what other challenges would you say were there? Like, what's something that you perhaps really struggled with back then, but you're really good at now?
I think especially when I was stepping into those roles, I was still like my late teens, early 20s. So you don't really know a lot about anything. I think that was kind of the challenge too, is like I have to know a little about everything, and maybe I don't know a lot about one specific thing. So I think, for your own confidence working in the industry, that itself is challenging. But one thing I didn't really appreciate enough was working through different municipalities and the amount of red tape you might face, and how each city changes over time, and each city is different to work with. So that, I think, you kind of have a schedule. You think it's going to take this amount of time because maybe when my dad was doing things, that was his schedule. But then when it's my turn at the helm, you kind of find out like that you're way off. So you kind of are, at the you're just waiting for somebody else to help your project proceed, but you don't really know what the right move is, right?
Yeah, municipalities, they're tricky, eh?
Yeah.
I know in the last 5 years, call it 7 years, there's been a lot of changes. One of the biggest cities that I know where I think a lot of developers were kind of screwed over was Langley.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you guys have any projects out there?
We have a few there now. We've got like 15 to 20 acres of land in Langley banked right now, and we've got 4 active projects in planning. Nice. And 2 under construction. So Langley's been good to us. I mean, I think it's easy for developers or people in the industry to point blame at the municipalities, but I think what I've done and what was big for me was, introducing myself to the staff, the planner, and that way I kind of know who's behind the table, and just kind of being sure that before I blame them, say, oh, they're dragging this, like, do you even have the proper forms completed, documents submitted? And if you don't have that, how can you expect somebody to be incentivizing or progressing your project if you don't really have your stuff in order, right? So I think I've done a good job of making sure I know who's on the other side of the email, or the other side of the table, and making sure they know that I'm equally involved in getting this project completed.
Nice, man. And I guess going back to the municipalities, I've heard, and I could be wrong, is the province, they're trying to get the municipalities or pressuring the municipalities to put together construction permits faster. Yep. Do you know a little bit more about that? I'm uneducated on this, so if you do have anything, I
think the province definitely sees the need for housing. They've got pretty lofty goals, a couple million people moving in or need homes by 2030, whatever it is now. But they're putting the pressure on each city, Surrey, Langley. But I think they're overlooking the kind of logistics of how to actually make those projects come to fruition, or how to deliver these homes. So I think it puts unnecessary stress on the cities. Like for us, I'd love to build more if you're going to densify this or speed up my processes. That's only one aspect of development. It's okay, does BC Hydro have enough capacity? Does Fortis have enough capacity? Is this area we're trying to develop and have the servicing in place to increase the density in that area, right? If it's only single family homes now, yet the province says, this is going to be condos, someone's going to have to pay for the sewer, water, school upgrades, all the civic infrastructure that goes into that. That's kind of not in front of mind, because maybe it's not the most political thing to hear or right now, because that's not the sexiest thing to hear. But the province says, we need more houses, we're going to fast track everything. Okay, fine. But that's the only one. That's only the end result.
That's interesting, because from my point of view and kind of where I'm sitting, I hear this from the province and I think, great, fantastic idea. Yeah. And I see some municipalities, actually taking some steps to make their process faster. But what you said, I don't think I've ever heard that from somebody else. And it's funny that this is coming from a developer.
I mean, if I would love for it to be that easy, and that's why I have a good relationship with place like City of Surrey, so they'll contact me to sit on committees and give my insight. And I think we're all on the same page. Is we all know we need to deliver housing in different forms and characters of that. But still, you got to make sure there's people need a place to live in, and that's above and below ground that needs to be taken into consideration.
Interesting. Well, thank you for your thoughts on that.
Problem.
That was good. And then I guess, the final question on this segment is talk about some successes. So originally, before we kind of sidetracked into this separate conversation, we're talking about your first experiences in a leadership position. Yeah. So we talked about some challenges, obviously, but now I want you to think about some of your successes. Maybe not all of them, but what's the one major success that you had and you thought, okay, I can do this. I can run this company. I know I'm the man,
I think our big success as a group has been employee retention, especially through acquisition. It gets tough. So it's hard to convey a company culture across different companies or across borders as well. So I think that's a huge accomplishment for us, is people not jumping ship post-acquisition. They see the vision, they see the leadership, they see career growth opportunities and say, this is a place I feel invested in. Nice. But more specifically, we had our first tower in Delta that took a long time to come to fruition. We're finally breaking ground on it on March 6th of this year.
Sorry, before you, what's the tower name?
The tower's called Walker House. It's on
Walker
Scott
House.
Road and 93A Avenue in Delta.
Yeah.
We spent a few years in planning. I kind of spearheaded the whole project from acquisition all the way through to permitting now. But yeah, it's a good story. My dad actually grew up when he immigrated here. He had a duplex that he was renting across the street, and he used to take the bus in front of the site to school. So now we're putting up a 30-story tower there, and my sister's clinic will go in there, and now we're planning a 37-story tower to accompany this one across the street.
And that's phase 2? Phase 2,
yeah.
BM Group International.com.
Yep, that's right.
Check it out. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to live there.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that's awesome, man. So that's great to hear. Obviously, I'm from Surrey as well, and that area that you guys are developing in, highly underdeveloped. And I think that there's a lot that you guys can do.
Yeah, I think we felt that with working with staff too. I mean, the area's hasn't been touched since it was initially developed in like the early 70s.
Yeah.
So I think we're definitely being the catalyst to revitalize that community.
I think it's just like Delta as a whole, man.
Yeah, I think they've been quite slow, but I think the current mayor and council are trying to work quite quickly. They got great goals, and hopefully they want to supply 3,000 homes by 2030, and I think between our two projects that we have, these two at least, that's 700-800 homes. So we're helping them crack down.
You guys are doing a third of that. Wow.
So I think that's a big accomplishment for us, and plus our ready mix plant is down the street, so we can. What developer has a straight line access to concrete? So I think that's a pretty important ingredient to a concrete tower. So homeowners can rest assured there's not going to be any, knock on wood, any crazy events that prohibits the tower going up, right?
Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, man, I think you guys have one of the most unique business models, especially as a developer. You don't really see like a lot of this. Most developers like, hey, we got the money, we'll hire people out to do it. So interesting the way you guys do it. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about you. We've talked about your company, some projects that are going on. Now let's talk about 2024, right? What is? I know this is a generic question, but I'll put it out there anyways. Yeah. What's the market outlook looking like?
I'm pretty optimistic about 2024. On the real estate side of things, our projects are still fairly active. We're seeing a lot of interest come in on the condo front. So I think people, the more sophisticated or investor-driven purchasers, they kind of see that, okay, the rates are starting to stabilize. They may go down this year, they may not, but I think they're still 1 or 2 years away from a substantial kind of decrease, and I think they are correlating that with the completion. So I think from the condo side of things, there's a lot of interest, and we're launching three projects in the condo front, and so I think there's going to be a lot more momentum heading into summer and the fall. And our operating business side, things have been quite steady, and I think it's just indicative of the entire real estate market. We're still a real estate based community and market here, so we've been balanced. But I think 2024 is not gonna be as gloomy as people think. But I think the fall and late summer are probably gonna be better than where we're at now.
Usually the doom and gloom stuff you hear from people that are sort of outside of the industry or just at the periphery, right at the edge there. But, whenever I talk with obviously guys like you, mortgage brokers, realtors, and other property managers, everyone's confident, like, hey, 2024 is the year. Could just be us, but...
it could be my blind optimism. But I think even then the market's slow, but there's not a lot of new product coming to the market. So it's one of those things where the developers that are career developers and are routine, I think they're going to benefit because they have to build. This is what they do, and they're going to be left with inventory to launch with. And they're going to be the only ones in the market with anything to sell. So I think it's going to be another case of little supply, all this demand, and maybe there's whoever's going to be on the positive side of things will benefit.
Nice. Well, I know we talked a lot about the residential side of stuff, right? We've talked about some of the condos that you guys are building, but what other trends are you seeing on in the real estate asset space? Like, if you were buying right now, you had $100 million and you're going to spend it, what sort of asset would you purchase and why?
I think the kind of greenfield land opportunities are few and far between at this point, especially from a financing perspective. So like raw land is probably not
raw land. That's what you mean by greenfield.
Yeah, it's kind of not the move. I think it's becoming more and more difficult to justify with increased land value. So I think now it's kind of asset classes that are generating some income. It probably won't cash flow positively, but at least it's doing something.
Yeah.
So if I had $100 million, I'm going straight to something that's commercial designated or a strata wind up or industrial backed or a mix of everything, just because there's a minimum density already there.
Yeah.
It's quite safe. Banks will look at it more favorably, and if you're going to inject cash, at least you're not injecting cash to a zero sum or a random lot that has maybe a tenant in there that's not going to do too much. Might be more of a headache than anything else. So I think that's probably the asset classes that are. I think, but what it comes down to is you're going to have to spend more to get into those asset classes. But I think they're more of a secure play at this point.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like you talked about it cash flowing.
Yeah.
Obviously, growing your equity to be able to finance other properties, things like that. And we kind of briefly touched on commercial properties, but what are your thoughts on that? Like, how often do you dabble in commercial properties, rental properties, that sort of thing? Like, what I do for a job. So, yeah.
I think with commercial, it's tough. We have a few buildings that we've acquired as land bank, like I mentioned, so those make sense. And usually we have a few interest in operating businesses within those buildings as well.
Yeah.
But most of our commercial development has been it's been accompanying a development. So if we have a condo building that's mixed use, there'll be commercial at the bottom, and we'll hold on to it, right?
So hold on to that. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, commercial is it's not our bread and butter.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a more fickle or volatile asset class than maybe. I mean, it's similar to office. It's kind of when everybody needs it, it's hot, and when people don't, it's kind of the first to become vacant.
Yeah.
But I think that's why you got to be mindful of who your tenants are, what you're trying to charge, and you got to play the long run there. And with rental, we've had a few buildings that I've designed and kind of applied to be rental, but if the market, the rates and the mortgages and all this, if the costs don't justify it, then you kind of have to scrap it and put it to the table and say, what, maybe it's better off we just sell these things as market condos and move on. So nice. We've held a bunch of units as rental, but as purpose-built rental buildings, I think it's tough to look at that within a 5 or 10 year horizon when it comes to rental. That's why all these pension funds and REITs are well equipped for it, because they're looking at hundreds and thousands of buildings over 30, 50 years, 30, right? 50, so their expectations is a lot different than maybe the average developer. Right?
And your turnaround for wanting profit is probably 5 to 10 years at BMG, right? Like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's interesting. That's an interesting way that you've kind of put it there. And yeah, you're right about REITs. You're obviously in industry. You've probably heard about BlackRock, BlackRock Financial. So they're coming up to Canada in a major way. Mm-hmm. And there's some smaller American financial funds like that are coming and scooping up real estate property here as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's much different than what we have now. We've got large investors coming in. We've had large investors be here. We see large transactions from pension fund to pension fund. So I think it's definitely going to make things more challenging for the local environment with all this money coming in. But I think they're transacting at such a high level that maybe it won't affect the day-to-day builder, or the more like meat and potatoes builder. So but it might, it's probably more of a challenge for somebody else.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess for obviously you guys as well, because you're not really in the commercial or the rental space like that. It wouldn't really affect your business unless they started building or scooping up the properties as
and if they do, then we'll be there to provide the material and services. So then I'm looking forward to it.
bmgroupinternational.com.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And last question before we go on our break here is just taking it back to the BM Group. Any new additions? Any new services that you guys are providing, or are you thinking of expanding your business in any other way?
Yeah, we've just acquired Princeton Ready Mix late last year. That came with the aggregate mine as well. So we're looking at the interior of BC now more than ever, and I think we're in that front. The ready mix and material supply industry is quite monopolistic, so we're looking to protect our industry and some of the independents. We're working on a few things right now, but I'm still kind of bound to a few NDAs at this point. But hopefully, if we speak again near the end of the year, we'll have a few big announcements. But I think I'll just say we're very involved with precast structures and finding quicker ways to put up a building using concrete and traditional building methods. So we're just looking at using the skills we have and building quicker at the end of the day. Yeah.
All right, Milan. Last when we were talking about the market outlook for 2024. We talked about your business and obviously about yourself as well. So now I want to kind of go into the fun part of this interview or podcast. I want to get into some advice. Like, what tips would you give to some up and coming guys? Obviously, you're from Surrey. I'm from Surrey. And I think we grew up pretty similarly, where our parents were always working all the time, immigrants, trying to figure things out. And essentially, what advice would you give to your 15-year-old self, looking back now?
I think you have to have a tangible skill set, and you have to be the value add. I don't think you can walk into any opportunity and say, well, I deserve to be here because I did this. You have to show somebody why you're going to make a difference. And I think that's, for me, if I tell my 50-year-old self, is hone your skills, find your craft, whatever it is. If you're going to be a financial expert or construction management, find whatever you want to do, be great at that first, and then find your footing from there. Don't try to skip any steps and try to focus on the end result right off the bat.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, man. One of the pieces of advice that's always stuck with me, this is from when I was at BCIT. My professor said, you never trust a guy that wears all hats, right? Yeah. Like a jack of all trades. Yeah. You trust the guy that's really good at what they're doing. Yeah. So I do agree with that. I think that's great advice. And I guess going back to skills, you did mention that, but in your position as a president, as a leader of any organization, what would you say are your top 2 or 3 most important skills that any leader should have or they should be developing?
I think you've got to be able to identify talent in one thing and be able to grow it. So providing opportunities for somebody to make your job easier. So even if you want to look at it selfishly, like if I want to focus on leading and growing my company, someone's going to have to focus on the operations on the day-to-day. So it's kind of providing that system. Second is, I think you've got to be able to navigate your business in a way that you got to be risk adverse, but still be mindful of the risk of an opportunity. So it's kind of like you want to grow, but grow in a way that's not going to put yourself in any financial position. Obviously, if something happens, you can't really account for it, but I think you got to be mindful of that as well.
Okay. And then how do you deal with, a big part of leading an organization is obviously navigating the unknowns, right? Because, you're essentially just generating money for yourself, your partners, whatever. How do you navigate that? And more specifically, how do you navigate the fear or, the insecurity that comes with it?
Yeah, I think we treat every dollar earned as, there's a use for it, right? Yeah. Especially when you have partners or investors. For us, even somebody deciding to purchase a home with us, that's their money and we have to deliver the product back. So I think I'm mindful of treating every dollar like it's a dollar owed to somebody. Okay. And our biggest partner in our business is the bank. So in order for us to grow, we have to make sure they're paid and then some, so they can lend us on the next project as well. So I think for us, that's kind of been kind of pivotal to our growth and our work here.
Nice. Yeah. And let's just take it back. Pretend you're 18, right? And just look forward to kind of where you're at now, right? What's the biggest thing that or how do I rephrase this? How have you grown personally from the time that you're 18 to now? What's the biggest thing that you think that you have grown in terms of leadership or personal, whatever?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think the way I've grown is I've become more I wouldn't say reserved, but more mindful of how perception, or maybe it's a bit of an insecurity at that point too, because for me, you got to identify a chip on your shoulder to how you're going to, run your business. For me, it's kind of trying to prove myself. So I think how I've grown since I was 18, 20 is finding my space within the company, identifying what I'm good at and focusing on that until you become a source for everybody a source and resource for everybody in your business, right? You don't want to just be operating in isolation by any means, but I think people see you're a value add to the company, and I still want to be, a part of the team, even if I might have a certain title or not. That's kind of irrelevant to me. It's just making sure everybody knows that we are all invested, we're all working hard, we're all trying to achieve the same goal. So I think that's something that you have to keep working on. Doesn't matter if I'm 18, 20, that's something I think I've kind of worked hard on, is just not letting any type of success kind of pump your ego and kind of guide your direction.
So to essentially like stay humble, like to remember where you came from and what exactly the goal is. No, that's awesome, man. And I guess, just on a more personal level, like what movies are you watching? Are you watching any shows?
Shit. I haven't really watched a lot of movies. I've been watching, I watch a lot of sports documentaries.
Nice.
Like I watch like The Final Dance every couple months. That's the Michael Jordan.
The Michael Jordan one,
I think the Patriots just launched like a Dynasty doc on Apple TV. But other than that, I'm such a creature of habit. I don't want to, with all the spare time I have, like I don't want to take a risk on watching something bad. Like I've just sat down, and by the time I find something new, I'm probably tired anyway. So I just like rewatch episodes of Modern Family or something. And or watch a lot of YouTube videos on like.
You ever watch The Office?
I watched a ton of The Office, a lot of The Office, a lot of Friends, or on YouTube I'm watching like just random like sports talk shows or like
just like random stuff.
Keep involved on the sports side of things.
No, I'm the same way as well. Like I just find like as you get older, time becomes limited and it's more valuable, right? But man, there are some really good shows out there.
I know. It's just like then you start watching it, then you kind of like forget, and then I watch like two seasons of Ted Lasso, and then you kind of forget the third one's up.
Well, if you're into it, like I've been watching a lot of South Korean shows. You know my brother-in-law Irvin. So he's been recommending like quite a few of them to me.
All my friends are into this South Korean or anime stuff, and I'm just
I don't know about the anime. Like that's whatever, it is what it is, right? But like the South Korean, there's this show. It's called The Glory. You should check it out.
I'll check it out.
It's pretty cool. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not gonna check it out.
We'll see.
Cool. Any books, quotes that you live by? Anything interesting that you've seen or heard?
I like one quote. I don't know if they said it was a Muhammad Ali quote, but I don't know if it's actually attributed to him. It's just, don't count the days, make the days count. And I think everyone thinks they have so much time to get things done, but I think in development or any business, once you realize the financial pressures of anything you're involved in, whether you're an owner operator or not, days turn to weeks, weeks turn to months, and months turn to years, and what do you have to show for it, right? So I think that's a big quote that I live by now, and I think for us it's kind of like, work hard in silence and let success make your noise, right? So I don't really feel like I need to do a ton of talking, and hopefully people and the work we do here kind of speaks for us.
Well, I think that's an awesome way to do an outro. Well, thank you so much, Milan. That's all the questions that I had. Thank you so much for obviously letting us come here and speak to you. BM Group, I feel it's a pretty recognizable brand, but no one really knows like who actually runs the BM Group or what it is. So I do appreciate you giving more clarity on that. All right, everybody. It's been Amin Gill, and I was joined here today with Milan Mann, who's the president of BM Group. They've got a couple of new projects coming out, so if you're interested, check out their website, or hit me up, shoot me a DM or something like that, and then maybe I can connect you guys. Thank you for watching.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.